Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. So there's been a vote on the Epstein files. Both houses of Congress have voted that the Justice Department needs to release its Epstein case files as soon as they receive the request from Congress, which one of the senators said should be today. The Senate voted unanimously for the measure. Meanwhile, in the House, only one member voted against it, some inbred-looking hick from Louisiana. Trump changed course on this and went from trying to persuade Marjorie Greene and others not to sign the petition to force a vote on it to now saying that he's fully on board with releasing the Epstein files. But that's weak sauce. The reality is the orange man couldn't stop it. And the longer that this dragged on, it was just another albatross on his shoulders. Worst of all, it was an albatross from his base. And while I personally believe that at this point the Epstein files have already been purged or otherwise scrubbed and sanitized of the most damning information, I do believe that whatever the released information is going to be, it's going to be messy. And even though in all likelihood Trump wasn't doing anything untoward with children, the Democrats, however, are going to run the same play that they did against Richard Nixon.
What did the president know, and when did he know it?
Even if there's nothing particularly damaging in there against Trump, to a large degree, the damage has already been done. Even Trump's old allies are declaring him a total hypocrite. Nick Fuentes, of all people, pointed out that if Trump really wanted the Epstein files to be public as president, all he had to do was issue an executive order declaring everything related to Epstein be declassified.
By the way, it goes without saying, Trump could release the files himself. He could sign an executive order as the president of the United States, and the DOJ and the FBI could release them without an act of Congress, without any of it. Trump would not have released the files if he could get away with it. And he tried to. He tried to trick us. He tried to lie to us.
He bragged about how things are declassified merely on his say-so. So why didn't he say so about this? Trump's only saving grace to this point, the only thing he's done right, the one thing he knows he has to do, if nothing else, is to maintain the support of the MAGA base. The white left media points out that he didn't get a majority of the popular vote, but he doesn't need it. So long as he maintains support from a critical mass of the white right, he's going to be able to have a political base. He's been doing it for 10 years. But the problem for him is that his base is determined to pursue the Epstein files, which clearly Trump is not. And all of these attempts to kick the can down the road, to bury it, to claim it was just a Democrat hoax, he threw all the red meat he could and then tried to use every dog whistle, dodge, and trick that he could, but it just didn't work. Because his own base has been pulling in the opposite direction.
What needs to happen now is a transition. Trump is a lame duck. 2026, most likely he's going to lose the House. 2027, people are going to start to run.
Midterm elections are just around the corner, and I guess Trump's calculating that this furor over the Epstein files hopefully will have died down a little bit by then. His top priority is making sure the Democrats don't get back control of the House, because then they'll begin pushing for impeachment again. But if I was a betting man, I'd say that whatever truly damning information from the Epstein files was destroyed before now. As a political protest against the debauchery of the white elite, I think the demands to release the Epstein files has value, but as a law enforcement matter, which is what most of these people think it is, I think it's DOA. The people Epstein was trafficking girls to are the most powerful people in the world. And how many of them have you seen go to prison? For anything. I would hope that I'm wrong, but I'm a student of history, and we've been here before with the JFK files. After JFK's assassination, the Warren Commission conducted what they called an investigation into it, but at the end, they then ordered a lot of the material, most of it in fact, that they had gathered, to be sealed. That's what the Warren Commission did, and Congress, conveniently, was never curious about it. But the public never lost interest, and after Oliver Stone's JFK movie in 1991 caused a firestorm of interest in the JFK assassination, Congress felt pressure to pass the John Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992, which they claimed would set up a process to review and release the files. Though not much really came of that, and more recently we saw the same thing happen again when earlier this very year we were told that everything worth seeing about JFK was going to be released now. Since then, the public has been told time and again that the files have been released, that everything there is to know about the JFK assassination has already been made public. But that's not true. What is true, though, is that anyone who could have possibly been indicted or put in prison for killing Kennedy has long since died, so they're beyond the ability of anyone to punish them. And that's the entire point of having sealed the records. There's been a nonstop gaslighting of the American people to tell them that the idea that Kennedy was assassinated by a conspiracy, that was nothing but pure insanity. And that there was nothing to the idea that the JFK files had some sort of damning information. Well, those denials might have held weight if they hadn't kept the information secret and sealed for decades. And then all the way to the present, they still haven't released all the information. You can't claim that there's no cover-up when you literally have reams of information under lock and key and refuse to release any of it. And there's also been a similar effort to try to normalize the secrecy regarding the Epstein files. Let's be honest with ourselves. The kind of people who would be able to kill a president and keep the whole government quiet, these are people who can also make sure that any files related to it are picked clean of any damning information. If there was proof that proved powerful people were behind killing Kennedy, that information would have been destroyed long ago. Trump's DOJ also pulled the same JFK fake-out and said that they were releasing the Epstein files back earlier this year. There was the much ballyhooed so-called Epstein binder, but as far as information goes, all they really released was some video taken from Epstein's cell block, not even video of his cell, but just of his cell block. And as with JFK, they claimed that now all the pertinent information on Epstein had been released and the matter was dead. That's what Trump was saying. There's nothing else to see here. It's a Democrat hoax. We got more important things. Epstein's not even that important. Of course, that was all a bunch of lies. In the case of Epstein, it hasn't been decades of a cover-up, but those files would incriminate far more people than the JFK files could. And worse, the Epstein files would incriminate people who are alive today, people who are still in the public eye, and whose lives would be destroyed by these disclosures. It would damage the institutions that these degenerates run too by confirming the public's belief that these politicians and these rich and powerful people are indeed engaged in all manner of demonic evil behavior, setting up islands where they can violate children. These people are just as evil as we always believed. This would confirm that the white elites are just as sick and degenerate as the public always said. They definitely don't want to confirm that. Though there is something else I think needs to be mentioned. Whenever there's some sort of scandal that involves white men being exposed, you can count the seconds before the white media twists itself into knots trying to make black men into the face of it. Let's go ahead and try to change the headline. We gotta find some black man we can put on the cover. We saw it happen with Me Too. All those white media executives were being forced to resign in disgrace. But what happened next? The white media executives who hadn't gotten taken down yet, they used their media monopoly to start a steady drumbeat pushing headlines about any and every black male celebrity they could, even Michael Jackson, who had already been dead for nearly a decade. And I predict that to the extent the Epstein files names and shames people, the white media will make it a point to single out any black politician or celebrities or whomever get mentioned and place all the attention and all the coverage on them. Whenever white males are getting too many negative headlines, they always change the subject to a black person. There's already been stories now about longtime Clinton confidant Larry Summers having exchanged friendly emails with Epstein after the media had reported on the allegations against him. Epstein had been convicted of solicitation of prostitution from a minor in 2008. He was being sued by numerous victims as early as 2013. 2018 was when the Epstein scandal broke into the public, when the Miami Herald began to report on the sweetheart plea deal that he got and his pedophile island. Epstein would be arrested by the feds on July 6, 2019, but Larry Summers had already been in regular contact with this convicted pedophile literally right up until the day he was arrested. Summers' last email that he sent to Epstein was on July 5th, the night before Epstein was arrested. But Larry Summers didn't have to wait until the arrest to know that Epstein was a creep, because Epstein was already making headlines worldwide before that for several months. The scandal had broken wide open several months before the arrest, but obviously Larry Summers wasn't bothered by any of the stuff that was being reported on Epstein. Kind of reminds you of the Academy Awards, doesn't it? Over in Hollywood, everybody from Harvey Weinstein to Roman Polanski, these guys get awards and they get lauded. You got the rich and famous who can't wait to have pictures taken with them. Harrison Ford personally delivered Roman Polanski his Oscar, even though Roman Polanski had already been found guilty of raping and sodomizing a child and was a wanted fugitive for these crimes. So pedophilia is not something that's simply winked and nodded at by the rich and powerful in politics. It's all of this white supremacist culture that embraces that kind of stuff. They celebrate it, and they make heroes out of these degenerates who rape children. Currently, there's calls from people like Elizabeth Warren for Summers to resign from his post as a professor at Harvard. The New York Times has said that they're going to be severing ties with him. Now, of course, we know that where white power is concerned, these are just temporary measures. They're just doing this as a PR maneuver. They'll go ahead and do a quickie announcement, and then later on down the line, they'll quietly bring him back. The headlines about Larry Summers are pretty tame, too, compared to what you would expect. Not one of the white media's headlines are comparing him to Epstein in any way. Instead, they're minimizing it, saying weird things like, "How could he be so stupid?" Stupid? A man intentionally maintains contact with someone who he knows is a convicted pedophile and who has been making global headlines for running a pedophile ring out of his private island, and the white media talks about his pen pal Summers as if he had merely neglected to file taxes for a couple of years or something. That's white privilege at work. They have to protect the Larry Summers of the world for the same reason that they protect the Jeffrey Epsteins. Keep in mind, the bulk of the Me Too accusations came against white men in the media. A disproportionate number of those accusations were about these white media companies, and now these same white media companies are supposed to be reporting on Jeffrey Epstein and who he had dirty dealings with. Larry Summers knowingly maintained contact with a man that he knew was under investigation for running a pedophile ring, and he thought nothing of it. He talked to the guy like he was his best friend. Summers was literally asking Epstein for advice on how he should approach some woman that he wanted to be romantic with. Yeah, because when you're looking for love, the best guy to get tips from is a man who you know tried to solicit a child for sex and who was making global headlines for being a pedophile. That's not stupid. It's sick. But I think it's safe to say that Hakeem Jeffries won't be getting that kind of leniency from the white media. They're already reporting that in 2013, a political firm who had been working to boost Hakeem's congressional career once invited Jeffrey Epstein to a Democratic fundraising event, and that part of the function would be for Epstein to be introduced to Hakeem and get to know him. According to Hakeem Jeffries, he never met Epstein, and the white media has presented absolutely no evidence to support the idea that he ever did. But just like with Nate Parker and so many other black men, they're reporting on Jeffries as if he did meet Epstein. So the inference being that Hakeem Jeffries should have known that he shouldn't meet with this man, never mind that even the white media has admitted that Jeffries hadn't reached out to Epstein. A Democratic Party lobbying firm did that, not Jeffries. And even then, Jeffries never actually met Epstein. Even Rupert Murdoch's rag, the New York Post, had to admit the FCC records don't show that Jeffries received any donations from Epstein, and that they couldn't produce any proof that Epstein even responded to the offer from that DNC-linked firm. But they buried this admission at the bottom of their story. That's a favorite white media trick, by the way, because most people only skim the headlines on a story. The white media knows that. That's what most people do. They only look at the headlines. Most of them don't actually read the stories. That's why the white media says that most people get their news from social media. By that, what they mean is that most people see a headline or they read a 2-sentence tweet on Twitter and that's it. Whereas if you actually go and read the stories, you'll see that things are exactly the opposite of what the headline said. And this is not to say that Jeffrey Epstein wouldn't have had people from, say, the Black Immigrant Caucus or other bad actors who are palling around with them. But my point is, you better believe that the white media is going to put the emphasis on those guys before it decides to lead another lynch mob against some high-profile white man. They don't want that kind of thing to become habit-forming. I'm not trying to be a downer here. I, for one, hope that this turns out to be exactly what people hope that it is, that it's going to be nothing but one high-powered scumbag after the next being exposed, brought down, teed up for prosecution. I hope that's the case. I hope my suspicions are wrong. But again, we've been here before. White power understands that occasionally the public needs to blow off some steam about the excesses of white power, and letting them have some cathartic political theater usually does the trick. Like the same politicians who had previously supported the police wholeheartedly and armed them to the teeth, and then turned right around and pretended to take a knee and acted like they were in solidarity with the black community during the 2020 uprisings. You know, that kind of cathartic political theater. It's a good thing that a dysfunctional oaf like Trump is president, because if you had a Democrat or Republican establishment figure that was in there, they would die on this hill before relenting. After all, the Democrats didn't try to release the Epstein files when Biden was in office. They could have. Kamala Harris didn't even promise to do it when she was running. A better question would be, why didn't Democrats want to release the Epstein files? Because Bill Clinton was gallivanting around with Epstein. The Epstein files don't lend itself to Democrats getting on a moral high horse, because a hell of a lot of Democrats, like Larry Summers and others, were sitting there staying in regular contact with this man. They were best buds with him, and they didn't care what he did. So we'll see whether or not the Epstein files are actually released, or whether or not there's going to be one courtroom maneuver after the next to try to throw this into years of litigation and stall. Again, Trump could go ahead and just do one executive order and all of this would be released, but he hasn't, and the Democrats aren't demanding that he do so either. So, to me, if I had to be a little conspiratorial about it, it just smells as if the fix is already in on this one, that both parties are putting on some political theater, and they're seeing whether or not the public is going to eat it up or not. Here's hoping that I'm wrong, but in order for that to happen, white-powered elites would have to basically not be on code with each other, and when they're facing a collective existential crisis like this, where the danger that one of them is exposed to is exposure for them all, well, I'm not holding my breath. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Christopher Ellis, Stephen 12, Anthony Pollard, Troy Joyner, and Ephraim Yashar L. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.